All right, everyone, buckle up. We're going deep today, like seriously deep. We're tackling Immanuel Kant, a
Whoa.
philosophical giant.
Yeah, a big
I
one.
know what you're thinking. Kant.
Yeah,
Intimidating.
a little bit.
But stick with us. We'll break it down.
Yeah.
Even if you've never touched a philosophy book in your life.
That's right. We'll make him relatable.
Exactly. Believe it or not, his ideas, they still matter.
Yeah.
Even centuries later. I mean, come on. And to do this right, we've got biographies, articles, essays, the whole shebang.
The whole 9 yards.
Our mission, to figure out who was this guy, what shaped him, and why are we still talking about him today?
It's a deep dive, people.
It is. And his ideas are timeless, really.
Yes.
We're talking those big questions about knowledge, morality,
Yeah.
our place in the universe.
The big stuff. So let's start our journey where Kant did. Königsberg, his hometown, now it's Kaliningrad, Russia. He spent almost his whole life there. And get this, Königsberg wasn't just any town. It was a cultural hub. And it was deeply, deeply influenced by pietism.
Pietism. Okay, for those of us who didn't major in 18th century religious movements, what exactly is pietism?
Well, think of it like this. It was all about strict morality, personal devotion, introspection, really diving deep into the core of Christianity, focused on inner virtue and like a direct connection with God.
Okay, so imagine growing up in that environment. Must have had some influence on young Kant, right?
Definitely. But here's the thing about Kant. He wasn't just a product of his time. Yeah, he took those pietist values, that moral rigor, but he was also a child of the Enlightenment. Reason, individual freedom.
Two powerful forces coming together. How does that show up in his work?
Well, he actually created this whole system of ethics, but not based on religious dogma, based on reason itself. Amazing how he wove those threads together.
So we've got faith and reason, moral strictness, individual freedom. Sounds like understanding the tension is key to understanding Kant.
Oh, absolutely. Woven right into his philosophy.
Okay, so how did he get there? What about his education? Who are the big influences?
Well, Kant was a true Renaissance man, studied at the University of Königsberg. And, he studied everything. Philosophy, mathematics, physics, even theology, absorbing it all.
Wow, a true polymath.
He was influenced by some major thinkers, German rationalists like Leibniz and Wolff.
Okay, just a quick refresher because it's been a while. Rationalism, meaning?
Meaning they believed reason.
Right.
Reason is the primary source of knowledge, not just senses.
Right. But Kant didn't just stick with rationalism, did he?
Nope. He was also reading those British empiricists like Newton, Locke, emphasizing sensory experience.
So he's blending, he's synthesizing already, early on.
Amazing. So what about his first published work? What was that all about?
Ooh, get ready for a mouthful. Thoughts on the true estimation of living forces.
That's
Yeah.
a bit dense, maybe.
It was. He was diving into a scientific debate about measuring force.
Technical stuff.
Super technical. But it shows his rigor. He wasn't afraid of complex issues. He was a deep thinker, even early on. All right, so we've got Kant. Brilliant, engaged with science and philosophy. And this brings us to one of his most, his most revolutionary ideas. It's called the Copernican revolution in philosophy. Now, I'll be honest, this one's always kind of tripped me up. What's the connection between Kant and Copernicus?
It's brilliant. See, before Kant came along, philosophers, they were obsessed with the object of knowledge, like trying to understand the world in itself. It's a blueprint.
A very direct approach, like here's reality, let's figure it out.
Exactly. But Kant, inspired by Copernicus, he flipped the script.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about what Copernicus did. He shifted the center of the universe, boom, from Earth to the sun, game changer.
Right.
Kant did something similar, but with philosophy. Instead of asking, how is the world made, he asked, how is knowledge even possible?
Whoa, okay, so instead of the world out there, he's focused on the knower.
The human mind.
Yeah.
Yes. He was obsessed with the conditions for knowledge.
So it's not just about what's out there, it's about how we experience it.
You got it. How our minds work when we, experience and understand things. Radical shift.
Huge. So how does this Copernican revolution change how we view reality?
Well, first consequence. Reality, as we know it, it's not just a copy of the world out there. Our minds, they're not cameras.
Not just recording.
No. For Kant, reality is this crazy interaction between the world and the structure of our own minds. It's a collaboration.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What are these structures you're talking about?
Good question. Kant identified two main types: the a priori forms of sensibility and the categories of the intellect.
Well, hold on.
Big words.
Some big words there. Break it down for me.
A priori forms of sensibility, those are space and time. But here's the mind-blowing part. They're not objective realities, like
Yeah.
existing out there without us.
Wait, so you're saying even time isn't objective?
It's not. It's how our minds experience the world.
Whoa.
Think of space and time as lenses through which we experience everything. We don't see the world as it is.
Oh, I like that.
We see it organized in space and time because that's how our minds are structured.
Okay, that's wild. So what about those categories of the intellect?
These are like the basic concepts we use to make sense of everything: cause and effect, substance, unity, plurality.
So we don't just see cause and effect happening.
Yeah.
Our minds actually bring that concept to the table.
Yes. Kant argued that those concepts, they're inborn.
Oh, wow.
We don't learn them, we apply them.
So the reality we perceive, it's not a perfect replica. It's shaped by how our minds work.
Bingo. That's Kant's transcendental idealism in a nutshell.
Transcendental idealism. I feel like I need a PhD just to say that.
It just means that reality, as we know it, depends on our minds. Idealism
Yeah.
and transcendental, because these structures aren't just personal quirks, they're universal, shared by all human minds.
So there's a shared structure to how we experience the world.
There is. And it's what makes something like scientific knowledge possible, because we're all working with the same mental framework.
That's amazing. But here's a question that pops into my head. If we're only experiencing reality through these mental filters, what about reality in itself? Like the world beyond our perception?
That's the big one, isn't it? Kant called this ultimate reality the noumenon. And for him, it's unknowable. We can only access the phenomenal world, the world as it appears to us, through those mental structures.
So are we trapped? Like in our own heads?
Kant wouldn't say we're trapped. He believes scientific knowledge is still valid, but it's limited
Go.
to the world of phenomena. The noumenon, that's always just beyond our reach.
Okay, so knowledge is valid, but there are limits. You mentioned earlier this idea of theoretical reason versus practical reason. What did you mean by that?
Okay, theoretical reason is what we've been talking about. Understanding the world, knowledge, science.
Yeah.
Practical reason is about action, moral action, what we ought to do, how we should live. Different ballgame.
So one is about knowing, one is about doing.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. For Kant, practical reason, that moral realm, it takes precedence.
Wait, what? Why?
Because for Kant, morality isn't just something we figure out from looking around. It's not about observing what people do and then copying.
So we can't just look around and go, okay, that's right and that's wrong.
Nope. Moral law, for Kant, it's grounded in reason itself. And this leads to his famous categorical imperative.
Ooh, yes. The categorical imperative is like, act only according to rules you'd want everyone to follow, universally, right?
Exactly. Like, what if everybody did that? If the answer is chaos, then it's wrong, even if it benefits you personally.
That's a pretty high standard.
It's rigorous. But there's beauty in it, too. Kant believed we should act not out of self-interest or fear of punishment, but out of respect for moral law itself. It's almost like noble.
So morality is about following these rules we discover within ourselves.
In our own reason, yes, not just rules imposed from outside.
And that brings us to autonomy. So important for Kant.
It is, that ability to determine our own actions based on reason. That's true freedom for Kant.
This is pretty mind-blowing stuff. But we know Kant was religious, right? A believer. How does all this fit with faith?
Good question. Kant valued faith, but he was very clear. Religion should not mess with reason.
So like a separation of church and state, but for the mind.
Exactly. Faith isn't a source of knowledge for Kant. It can support moral living, inspire us, but it can't tell us what is moral.
So faith might be the motivator, but reason's the guide.
That's it. Moral law comes from within, from reason, not from, religious revelations or anything like that.
Okay, so for Kant, reason guides us in how we understand the world and how we act. But when we say reason, are we talking just pure logic?
Oh, no. Kant's view of reason is much richer than that. He includes feeling and intuition. We're not robots.
So it's not all cold, hard logic.
No. We're complex beings with emotions, a sense of beauty, all of that.
Which reminds me, didn't Kant write a whole book about judgment, including aesthetic judgment?
Yeah.
Like our sense of beauty.
He did. The Critique of Judgment. It's where he explores our ability to judge beauty, the purposefulness of nature, even the validity of our actions.
Wow, okay. But how does beauty fit in with all this metaphysics and morality talk? Seems like a different world.
Kant wouldn't see it that way. For him, beauty wasn't just subjective pleasure.
So not just in the eye of the beholder.
More to it than that. He argued our judgments about beauty are based on a universal principle,
Yeah.
like a common sense of taste shared by all humans.
Hold on, are you saying beauty isn't in the eye of the beholder? Like there's an objective standard?
For Kant, there's a basis for our appreciation of beauty that's not random. It reveals something about how our minds are wired to grasp harmony and order in the world.
That's an interesting take. So beauty has this deeper dimension.
Yeah.
What about his ideas on the purpose of nature? What did he mean by that?
Well, in the Critique of Judgment, he grapples with this question. Can we view nature as if it had a purpose? Like, as if some intelligence designed it?
So like the intelligent design idea.
You could say that, but Kant doesn't actually say nature has an objective purpose. He's more subtle.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does he say?
He says that kind of judgment about nature's purpose is a regulative principle for our knowledge.
Meaning?
It's useful to think about, but it doesn't tell us how nature actually is.
It's a tool, not the truth itself.
Exactly, like a map. Helps us explore, but it's not the territory.
So reason's powerful, but it has limits.
Big time.
We can't assume we know the absolute truth.
You gotta be humble.
Now, shifting gears a bit, one thing I've always found fascinating about Kant is his moral rigor. He was all about absolute duty, no compromises.
Oh, yeah, Kant's ethics can be daunting. He believed moral law was grounded in reason, especially the categorical imperatives.
Right, act only according to rules you'd want everyone to follow, period.
Exactly, and as we said, that's hard to live up to.
But there's something powerful in that idea, that every person has inherent dignity, intrinsic worth.
Absolutely. For Kant, that's the heart of morality, the categorical imperative. It's about respecting that dignity in every person.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, Kant believed each person is an end in themselves. Not just a means to an end, a tool. It's about fundamental respect.
Makes Kantian ethics powerful and relevant, but also really demanding.
No doubt. Living up to those principles, it can feel impossible sometimes.
But Kant wasn't expecting perfection, was he?
No, he knew we're not perfect, but that doesn't mean we give up. He saw the categorical imperative as a guide, a compass.
A compass.
To a more just and authentic life.
I like that image. So we've covered science, ethics. What about politics? How did his ideas shape political thought?
Well, we touched on it, but Kant was a huge advocate for peace.
Yeah.
And what he called cosmopolitanism.
Cosmopolitanism.
It's pretty radical for his time, an era of wars and revolutions.
So he was like a pacifist.
Yeah, he envisioned this world without war, where states cooperate.
Sounds pretty idealistic.
Maybe, but for Kant, it was a goal worth fighting for. And he had ideas about how to get there.
Intriguing. How did he think this world peace thing would actually work?
For him, peace was built on reason, law, morality. States should respect international law, resolve conflicts peacefully, and promote, freedom, human rights.
So a world order based on justice, not just power.
Yes, but it went beyond states. He believed in a cosmopolitan world where all humans have equal rights.
Wow, that's radical even today.
It was revolutionary back then, a reminder that we're all part of a global community.
This has been mind-blowing. We've barely scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
So much more to uncover about Kant.
His work is vast.
Full of fascinating insights, challenging ideas, but we're just getting started.
Stay tuned. And, we can't really talk about Kant without talking about his impact on science. His ideas about, space and time, those categories of understanding, it really, really changed how scientists viewed the world and the whole nature of, scientific knowledge.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if space and time aren't these objective things out there, but structures of our minds.
Yeah.
That has to make you wonder, how do we observe and measure anything in science, really?
Exactly. Kant argued that science works, that we have these laws of nature and can predict things. It's because of these shared structures of understanding, our minds impose order on the world through these categories.
So it's not just about discovering some pre-existing order, like it's already there.
Not quite. It's more like we're actively building knowledge based on how our minds are wired.
That's pretty radical. Doesn't that make it sound like subjective, like it's all just in our heads?
That's where it gets tricky. Kant didn't think science was arbitrary or anything. Remember those mental structures, the categories? They're universal.
Right.
Shared by every human mind. So while we are actively constructing knowledge, we're all doing it with the same basic building blocks.
So it's like we're all playing the same game with the same set of rules.
Perfect analogy, even if we're creating the game as we go along, yeah.
Kant was walking a tightrope there, wasn't he? acknowledging how our minds shape things. But Priya's also saying science has to be grounded in something more than just, like, individual whims.
Definitely. A delicate balance. But I think he pulls it off.
Okay, so we've talked about science, we've talked about ethics, but I feel like we could dive a little deeper into how Kant's ideas about morality have played out, in the real world.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, his ideas about duty, autonomy, the inherent worth of every person, they've had a huge impact on how we think about, morality, human rights, even political systems.
Right, because if you really take seriously that idea that every person is an end in themselves, not a means to an end, that has to change how we treat each other, how we structure our societies, everything.
Absolutely. Morality wasn't about blind obedience for Kant. It was about recognizing the moral law within us, grounded in reason, specifically in the categorical imperative.
That principle of act only according to rules you could universalize really makes you think about the ripple effects of your actions.
It does. It forces us to ask, would I want everyone to do this? Would it violate someone's dignity? Those are questions that go way beyond just like what's good for M in this moment.
It's a challenge, but it's also it's inspiring. Like Kant's setting a high bar for how we should treat each other.
He is. Kant's ethics are definitely demanding, but they also offer this powerful vision of moral responsibility, of human dignity. It's like a call to live up to our full potential, as rational beings who make choices based on principles.
Not just impulse.
Not just what feels good right now.
Okay, we've talked science, ethics.
Yeah.
What about politics? How did Kant's ideas shape political thought?
Well, we touched on this before, but Kant was a big advocate for peace and what he called cosmopolitanism.
Cosmopolitanism.
Yeah, he really believed in a world where states would give up war and work together for the common good.
I admire the idealism, but I mean, that seems almost impossible, right? Especially in the world today.
It was a radical vision, even for his time.
Yeah.
But Kant didn't see it as just a naive dream. He thought peace could be achieved through this combination of reason, law, and morality.
So how did he imagine that actually happening?
Well, he argued that states should respect international law, resolve conflicts peacefully, and champion things like freedom and human rights.
So a world order based on mutual respect, cooperation, not just power grabs and, everyone for themselves.
Exactly. But it went beyond just relations between states. Remember, that cosmopolitan world, where every human has equal rights and opportunities no matter where they come from.
That's powerful, but wasn't it pretty out there for his time? I mean, we're still struggling to achieve that kind of global unity today.
Oh, absolutely. Kant was ahead of his time in a lot of ways, but his ideas are, they're still so important. They push us to keep working towards a more just, peaceful, and equitable world for everyone.
They do. So far, we've been focusing on the positive side of Kant's legacy, but I'm guessing there were some criticisms of his work too, right? I mean,
Right.
No philosopher is perfect.
Oh, of course. Every great thinker sparks debate. One common criticism is that his system, it can feel a bit too abstract, too disconnected from the messy reality of being human. Some people argue that focusing so much on reason and duty, you kind of neglect emotions, intuition.
So all head, no heart. Too much cold logic.
Kind of. And then there's the question of how do you actually APFLY Kant's principles in this crazy, unpredictable world we live in?
Right, because the categorical imperative sounds great in theory, but when you're faced with real-life dilemmas,
It's tough.
with competing values, unintended consequences,
It's like, where do you even start? Critics say Kant's ethics can be too rigid.
not enough wiggle room for real-world problems.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of some of Kant's views on certain topics. Common for his time, but not so much today.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that even brilliant minds can have blind spots. We can appreciate his genius, but also be critical of those aspects.
Absolutely. Critical engagement is key when you're dealing with any big thinker. We shouldn't shy away from the tough questions.
So celebrate the contributions, but don't ignore the problematic parts.
Right. It's about having an honest, nuanced conversation.
Okay, so besides those criticisms, were there any other, big debates or controversies that Kant's work sparked?
Oh, tons. I mean, his philosophy is so rich and complex, it's generated endless debate over the centuries. One ongoing debate is about that thing in itself idea, the noumenon.
Right.
Some philosophers are like, if we can't even know it, what's the point? You're talking about something that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, if it's beyond our grasp, why bother?
Right, but Kant's defenders say, no, the noumenon is important. It reminds us of the limits of reason. keeps us humble.
So check on our arrogance, basically.
Exactly. And then there's this whole debate about the nature of those categories of understanding. Are they really universal and necessary?
Like hardwired.
Or are they shaped by, our cultures, our history?
So nature versus nurture for our minds.
Kind of. Some argue that Kant's categories are too Western, too specific to his time and place. Others say, well, the content might vary, but the underlying structure of how we think, that's universal.
Maybe it's both. Universal structures and the cultural influences.
Could be. And then you've got the debates about the categorical imperative itself. Is it really this absolute moral principle? Or does it need some tweaking for the 21st century? New ethical challenges and all that?
What was clear-cut back then might need some rethinking now.
Right. And there's the question of how do you reconcile Kant's focus on individual autonomy with the need for, social justice, collective action?
The rights of the individual versus the needs of the group.
Classic tension. And Kant's work makes us grapple with it.
It seems like his legacy is as much about the questions he asked as the answers he gave.
That's a great point. Kant's work is an invitation, really, to think critically, to challenge assumptions, to keep having these conversations about the big stuff.
Not about easy answers.
No. It's about embracing the complexity of being human.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
Beautifully put. And Kant gives us the tools for that journey.
He does. Okay, we've covered a lot. Kant's early influences, his impact on science, ethics, politics. But before we wrap things up, there's one more piece of his thought that's always fascinated me. His idea of the sublime.
The sublime.
Yeah.
Such a fascinating and often misunderstood concept.
I'm all ears. What did Kant mean by the sublime? How does it fit into his big philosophical picture?
For Kant, the sublime is an experience that goes beyond just beauty. It's about awe. Overwhelming power. This feeling of something that transcends our normal ways of understanding.
So beauty might be harmony and pleasure, but the sublime is more about being, blown away by something vast and powerful.
Yes. Imagine standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, or looking up at the stars, or witnessing a huge thunderstorm.
Okay, yeah.
Those are sublime experiences. They evoke this awe and wonder that we can't fully grasp.
So it's about encountering something that exceeds our understanding, something that pushes us to our limits.
Exactly. And Kant thought this experience, it changes us.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, it reminds us how small we are, how finite, in the face of something so much greater.
It's humbling.
It is. But it's not just about feeling tiny and insignificant. It's also about realizing the power of our own minds to even grasp these vast, overwhelming concepts, even if we can't totally wrap our heads around them.
So it's humbling, empowering at the same time.
That's the paradox. The sublime stretches us, makes us confront the unknown, the power of human imagination.
That's amazing. I've had those moments looking at a mountain range, listening to a piece of music, and feeling both incredibly small and intensely alive all at once.
You've got it. The sublime expands our sense of what's possible.
Like a glimpse into infinity, even if we can only see a tiny fraction of it.
Exactly. And Kant believed this experience was even connected to morality.
Wait, really? How so?
He thought the sublime could awaken this moral feeling in us, this sense of our own freedom and responsibility.
So it's not just about aesthetics, about beauty. There are ethical implications.
There are. Kant thought experiencing the sublime could inspire us to act morally, to strive for good, to live up to our potential as humans.
So standing in awe of nature could somehow make us better people.
That was his thinking. The sublime could shake us out of our complacency, our self-centeredness, and awaken this deeper sense of moral purpose.
That's incredible. I never thought about the sublime that way.
It's not just appreciating nature. It's about recognizing its power to transform us.
Okay, so for Kant, it's all connected. Aesthetics, ethics, our understanding of the world.
Totally. He saw these deep connections. He believed the human mind is capable of grasping beauty, morality, the vastness of the universe, even if we can never fully comprehend them.
And it's that striving, that reaching for something more that gives us meaning.
That's it. Now, before we move on from the sublime, there's one more important concept. Kant's distinction between the mathematically sublime and the dynamically sublime.
Okay, now we're getting into the weeds. What's the difference between those two?
The mathematically sublime, it's about encountering something so vast, so huge, that it just overwhelms our ability to even comprehend it.
So like the size of the universe.
Yeah.
The endlessness of time.
Exactly. It's about facing something that's beyond measure, beyond quantification.
And the dynamically sublime.
That's about experiencing something incredibly powerful, something that evokes a sense of overwhelming force.
Like a hurricane, a volcano erupting.
Precisely. It's about feeling small and vulnerable, but also awestruck by the power of it all.
So one's about size, one's about force.
You got it. And they both trigger this similar response in us. Awe, awareness of our limits, and this recognition of our mind's power to at least try and grasp these things.
So whether it's the vastness of space or the raw power of nature, the sublime pushes us to the edge of what we can understand.
It does. Makes us think outside the box, beyond our usual categories.
And that's what makes it so powerful, so enduring.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've officially reached peak Kant for today.
We've been through a lot.
My brain is, well, it's both stimulated and dehumbled.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you.
Yeah.
Kant's work is a constant reminder that the pursuit of knowledge, it's a lifelong adventure.
Full of challenges.
Paradoxes, insights, it never ends.
And that the journey itself is just as important as reaching some final destination.
Beautifully said.
It really is. It's not about, having all the answers. It's about asking those questions,
Right.
challenging ourselves, and always being open to learning more, to expanding our understanding.
And Kant gives us the framework for that journey. It keeps us going, keeps us exploring.
It does. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring it back to our listener for a second. Why should they care about Kant? What makes his ideas relevant to us today?
That's the question, isn't it? Why does any of this matter in the 21st century?
Well, I think Kant's work is more relevant now than ever, actually, especially when you think about all the complex challenges we're facing.
Mm-hmm.
Artificial intelligence, climate change, globalization, and just like the erosion of trust in our institutions, all of it.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So how does Kant help us navigate all of that?
Well, his emphasis on reason, on critical thinking, that's crucial. In a world where we're just bombarded with information from all sides, misinformation, fake news, it's overwhelming.
It really is.
Kant reminds us to slow down, to examine what we believe, question those assumptions, and look for evidence-based knowledge.
Yeah, we can't just passively absorb everything we see and hear. We have to develop those critical thinking muscles.
Exactly. Filter out the noise, figure out what's true. And Kant also gives us this framework for thinking about ethics, moral responsibility, in a world that's, well, let's face it, it's getting more and more complicated. Right, because the categorical imperative, while it is challenging, it does offer this like universal principle for guiding our actions, making sure we're treating each other right, with dignity and respect.
That's it. In a world grappling with ethical dilemmas around technology, healthcare, social justice, the list goes on, Kant gives us a foundation for making moral choices.
He does. And that focus on individual autonomy, on self-determination.
Oh, that's huge.
That's so relevant today, too.
It is. Kant's basically saying, think for yourself, make your own choices, live according to your principles, don't just follow the crowd.
Which is hard.
It's so hard.
When we're constantly being pulled in different directions by, social media, advertising, politics.
Right, all of these external forces trying to tell us what to think, how to act.
Kant's like, nope, cultivate that inner compass, figure out what's right for you.
That's the message. Now, as we wrap up our deep dive, is there one key takeaway from Kant? One essential idea you want our listener to walk away with?
Ooh, good question.
I think the most important takeaway is this. Kant believed that we as humans were capable of grasping these profound truths about ourselves, the world, the universe. But it's not easy. That knowledge, it's not just given to us. We have to work for it. We have to build it. Through reason, experience, critical reflection.
It's active, not passive.
Exactly. And that process, that journey, that's where the real meaning is. That's what makes life, well, fulfilling. It's about embracing that quest for knowledge. Never stop asking questions.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank our listener for joining us on this incredible journey into the mind of, the mind of Immanuel Kant.
He was a force.
Challenging, complex, but brilliant. His ideas, they still matter today, more than ever, maybe.
They do. And we encourage all of you, keep digging deeper. Keep those questions coming. Explore these ideas. There's so much to discover.
Until next time, keep those minds sharp and never stop questioning. That's what Kant would want.
Absolutely. He'd be proud.